Oh yeah, that's how much I'm
All right, so greeting everyone and welcome to this class. We're going to begin by reciting Refuge, Bodhicitta, and Gantang Lagema. Now, everybody knows how important it is at the beginning to adjust the motivation. There have been many instructions, and we always do it at the beginning of the session. So you should know by now how to do it. Adjusting the motivation is extremely important. In terms of Buddha Dharma, what defines whether the activity becomes or its proper Buddha Dharma is the proper motivation. And you must have noticed that every time we have, a big ceremony, such as, for example, an initiation, a transmission, a Jenang and so forth, or, commentaries, teachings, and so forth, there is an introduction. At the beginning, the Lama always gives an introduction before entering the main part of the occasion. And the introduction is there to shape our minds properly by adjusting the motivation. So this is what the introduction is all about, and this is why it is important. All right, so in this class, we spent the first part where we looked at the sevenfold classification of mind and awareness. And now we come to the second part of this class that is dedicated to examining the mind and mental factors. Mind and mental factors are very important. So just to present this presentation of minds and mental factors is very crucial. Why is this? The reason for this is because within our mind, many mental factors arise and operate. The thing is that we don't recognize what type of minds are there. We don't recognize what mental factors are operating within our own minds. And in this way, we generate a lot of afflictions. As a result of these afflictions, we cycle within samsara. The important thing here to know is that the mind is a creator. So everything good, everything bad that will follow, everything good or bad that is established by the mind. And therefore, it's very important to recognize, to be introduced, to be able to know what the mind is and how the mental factors operate together with this main mind. Now, we use the expression of, we say, oh, we accumulate karma. But it is actually these mind and mental factors that are operating for the accumulation of this karma. And then accordingly, obviously, as we say, good and bad things will follow. The fact that the mind is the creator is mentioned in all the sutras and the treatises. So, of course, one could spend quite a lot of time giving quotations or references from all those texts. But we don't need to do this, and this is not the purpose of the class here. The important thing here is to introduce so that we can understand what is mind and what is mental factor, and to give you an idea what is the purpose for studying this. Then Kadampa Geshe of the past, they used to say that the person has no power because the person is under the power or under the influence of the mind. But then again, the mind has no power because the mind itself is under the influence or under the power of afflictions, the three poisons. And once your mind is under the influence of the three poisons of afflictions, then the result is that you end up circling within samsara. So you see, we have this idea that we are powerful, we're independent, we make the decisions, but this is not true. The person is not in control. The person is under the control or the power of the mind. The mind is much more powerful. But then again, the mind itself is not in control because afflictions, the three poisons, are much more powerful and they govern the mind. They decide what the person does. So here, when we talk about the afflictions of the three poisons, we come right into the presentation of mind and mental factors. Because we don't recognize our own mind, because we don't have control over the mind, because we cannot shape the mind as we should, we end up wandering everywhere within samsara. And everywhere you find yourself within samsara, there is no happiness. Everything within samsara is in the nature of suffering. As I say, being in samsara is like sitting at the tip of the needle. So if you're sitting at the tip of the needle, how could you ever be comfortable? How could you ever be without suffering? The thing is that everything we do, everything we experience, we think, oh, you know, this is so pleasant, this is so nice. But whatever the experience is, it will change and it will lead into suffering. We look at each other and we think, oh, look, this other person over there, they're so happy, right? So Geshe was saying, I'm looking at you and I think you are, you know, you are so happy, you're free, you don't have my problems, you are so happy, you are free. But of course you have suffering, of course you have problems. From your side, you look at me and you think, oh, look at Geshe, you know, he's always smiling, he's good, he has nothing to worry about, he has no problems. It's not true. I have my own suffering. I have my own problem. We look around, it's like, you know, people look at the king or the prime minister or someone rich and they say, oh, you know, if only I could live with them. If only I could be with them. You know, they have everything. The food is good. All the living conditions, accommodation is good there, you know, but they have so much problem. Someone who's in power really has to find a way to govern, stay within the laws, not overstep any boundaries. You know, they're dealing, you know, power is really very difficult to handle and so forth. So whether you are high, whether you are low, whoever you are, you have suffering because the nature of samsara is to be the nature of suffering. And it all comes because we cannot control our mind. We cannot shape the mind. Okay. All right. So we're talking about mind and mental factors. So obviously we want to make it the differentiation. We want to differentiate. There are two different things. One is the main mind. The other thing is the mental factors. So obviously we want to give some sort of explanation, some sort of definition. But the way that we're going to do this is, first of all, start by looking at how other people posit mind and mental factors. And when we read or when we understand how they posit, we analyze and we see whether there are some faults, whether there are some mistakes in the way that they present the mind and mental factors. And by looking and identifying the weaknesses and the mistakes in other people's presentation, then eventually we will come to understand our own presentation quite well. All right, so someone says that the main mind is a cognizer that understands or cognizes the nature of its own object through its own power, while the mental factor is the cognizer who understands the specific feature of its own object through its own power. Okay, so we can look at this through an example, and the example that they give is sense awareness apprehending form. So when you have sense awareness apprehending form, you're going to have main mind. Oh, you can't hear. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. So how did you hear at all the two definitions of main mind and mental factors of others?
I think we sense
okay. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So we're looking at the example of sense awareness apprehending form. In that, we will have definitely main mind and mental factor. So they are both, since it is awareness apprehending form, the object that they are looking at is form. So the main mind, according to this presentation, which is not our presentation, it's somebody else's presentation, is the main mind will understand through its own power the nature of form, whilst the mental factor will recognize specific characteristics of form, like is it long, is it short, is it beautiful, is it ugly, and so forth. So this is the definition or the presentation that they give. Anyway, Geshe was saying, when you come across this expression, one says, or somebody says, okay, which comes a lot in those debate texts. Okay, so one says, and then, you hear something and then we debate them. Geshe was saying, when I was studying and we came across this, it was like, who said this? Who said this? Who's someone saying this? But it's just to introduce, some people say this, or one might say this, all right? So don't get caught up as to who said it. It's just like one might say this. And anyway, it's a device to bring in this information so we can start discussing. Okay. All right, so in their definition, the main difference, right, is that the main factor is the one that cognizes the nature, whilst the mental factor is the one who cognizes characteristics. So we say that this is not acceptable. Why? Because actually both the main mind and the mental factors in its retinue, they both recognize the nature and the characteristics. And the reason for that is because mind and mental factor are concomitant in 5 ways, in terms of focal object, in terms of aspect, in terms of support, of time, and substance. So whatever the main mind cognizes, the mental factors also cognize the same thing.
어떤 리당디 셈셈 중 니가 오릭 바타네 트라냠레 케발 릭 바이네 릭 바타냠레 제선디 딱 지금아서 딱고 디가 카지디 유조 도스타네 조 셈기 수기 모랑도 지리 바스 두 잡르다 수기 모리아지로 모랑도 지 소르 모랑도 지리 바지고 그래서 로 셈중라 안에 케버랑도 지리바스 조 케버랑도 지리바 두샤그리스 두히용고레 다디아 랭마레스 조당 케버 다두스자네 디그마레스 다 가르스도 갈라 심심중기 다유 라야 조운도 갈라 심중이네다 세미네다도 조당 디니기 케버 가이 제사 요마레 kunyiga ridang chikpa chijang re mato kyorong ki zo dangdine mungu chijane pendo kayo mares oda chikpa chijang res oda di tegi mares tuska mares o zo rikpa tang kebar di zo rikpa saya chare de diye rikpa mares jebarda.
Okay, so in the first instance, we reject this presentation and we're saying, no, the difference between mind and mental factors, it cannot be that one recognizes the nature and the other recognizes specific characteristics. Okay, so they come and they modify a little bit the presentation and they say, okay, main mind is the one that cognizes mainly the nature through its own power, and mental factor is the one that cognizes mainly or chiefly, predominantly, the characteristics through its own power. So we'll come back and say, no, again, adding this word mainly this or chiefly that, again, it doesn't help at all, because the main mind and its mental factors actually cognize exactly the same things. There's no difference in what they cognize, that one mainly cognizes this and the other mainly cognizes the other. There's no difference. Okay, now someone else comes in and says, okay, no, I know the difference between main mind and mental factors is whether or not they cognize through their own power. So one cognizes through its own power, the other does not cognize through its own power. Again, we reject this because we say both mind and mental factor, they cognize their object through their own power. So we have given the example here of sense awareness apprehending form. The object is form, and both the main mind and the mental factors are valid awareness or prime cognizers who determine or find, and they have certainty in relation to their object. So because they are prime awareness, valid awareness in relation to that form, they do it, they cognize it through their own power. So again, there's no difference. They both do it through their own power. So as you can see here, they are implying that the main mind, that is the one that recognizes the nature of form, recognizes that through its own power, whilst the mental factors that cognize the features or the special, the special details of form, does it through the power of another. So again, this is something that we negate, we stop this because we say both mind and mental factor, they both cognize the nature of form and the features, the characteristics of form through their own power, both of them, because both of them are valid awareness with respect to that form. So as you can see, we have negated or we have stopped many wrong ideas. Okay, so now, the example that we have been giving is sense awareness apprehending form, right? So you might come up with a question here and say, okay, if this is the example you're giving me, and in this awareness, I have both mind and mental factors, and these mind and mental factors are concomitant in 5 ways. Is it always the case that mind and mental factors realize their object? The answer to that, no, it's not always the case. This is an example of minds and mental factors realizing their object, but we have seen many types of awareness that do not realize the object. And in these types of awareness, such as, for example, awareness to which the object appears but is not ascertained, you will have mind, main mind, and mental factor that don't realize the object. So, as we say here, a main mind and the mental factors in its retinue, it's not necessarily that they always have to cognize the object, realize the object. Some realize the object, some don't realize the object. But in a specific case of a mind and its mental factor, because they are concomitant in 5 ways, when they engage the object, they engage the object in exactly the same way. So that if that particular mind realizes the object, then there is no question the mental factors that accompany that main mind also realize the object. It's not the case that the main mind realizes, but the mental factor don't realize it. No, if they realize it together. It's not the case that the aspect appears to the main mind, but does not appear to the mental factors. No, whatever aspect appears to the main mind will appear to the mental factors as well, and so forth. So you need to understand when the mind and its mental factors engage the object, they engage the object in an equal way. Whatever happens to one happens to the other. All right, so far we have negated the presentation and the definitions of others. So it's about time now that we present our own system. So in presenting our own system, we have 5 outlines in this presentation. The first one is the definitions. The second one is classifications. The third one is ways in which they are concomitant or they have similarities. The fourth one is one and different, and the last one is the meaning of the term, sort of like terminology. Okay, explaining the terminology. So we will start with the first one, which is definition. Actually, in Latte Rinpoche's book, if you look on page 143, you will find the mind and mental factors. And we have there the definition of the mind is that which has similarity with the mental factors that arise as its accompaniers. Okay, so what is it saying here? It says that you have the main mind and its retinue. You have many mental factors that accompany that main mind. So the main mind is that which has similarities with those mental factors that accompany it as its retinue. Okay, so you hear this definition and you say it's not, okay, it's a definition, but it's, I don't see what the main mind clearly is through this. Why? Because there is one word here in this definition that has not given us enough information. So it says that the main mind is that which has similarity with those mental factors. So it's translated as similarity, but actually we use the word concomitant, right? So it's in agreement with those mental factors, or it has similarity. But we don't fully understand yet what that means. And this is why we don't understand the definition. And this is why in the five-fold classification of this presentation, we have definition, then we have classification. The third one is explaining this similarity, this concomitance between them. So it's coming. Okay, so if we look at the terms that we're using, we talk about mind and mental factors. Actually, this mind, the term mind, indicates main mind, and the other ones are the mental factors. So mental factor here indicates that they are not the main one. As we say, they are the retinue. So if you have one main one, it's almost like the king. And the king has many mental factors, or has many ministers, you could say, in his retinue. Okay, so we have a situation here where, there's a job to be done. And the job to be done is that the mind has to engage the object, isn't it? But you see that the mind tells the mental factors to engage the object. And each of the mental factor has its own way of operating, engaging the object. So the job is done by all these mental factors engaging the object or doing the job. Now, we say there are many, it's a retinue that contains many mental factors, but from amongst those many, there are 5 that are the most important. They're called the 5 omnipresent. They're always there, right? So these 5 omnipresent mental factors definitely, do the job of engaging. They have these functions of engaging the object. Okay, so let's give you an example here. Let's have a main mind that wants to have the experience of the feeling of happiness. So this main mind, as we say, is like the king. The king needs to have this experience. How is the main mind having the experience of the feeling of happiness? It has this because in its retinue, it has the mental factor of feeling. So the mental factor of feeling, as we say, is like a servant to the king. The mental factor of feeling is the one that directly goes out there and acquires that feeling of happiness. As the mental factor experiences that feeling of happiness, the main mind also simultaneously at the same time experiences that feeling of happiness. So there is that thing that we said, it's not the case that the main mind experiences, but the mental factor doesn't experience, or the mental factor engages, but the main mind doesn't engage. They are equal in what they do. You know, the one who has the experience is the main mind, but it does this through the mental factor of feeling. The mental factor of feeling is there to have the experience. As the mental factor has it, the main mind also has it. All right, so it is like this. My hand reaches out and picks up the pen. So I say, I got the pen. My hand got the pen. I cannot say that I got the pen, but the hand didn't get the pen. Or I cannot say that my hand got the pen, but I didn't get the pen. I told the hand to get the pen, isn't it? So whatever my hand got, I got. It's like this. Let's look at the definition of the mental factor. It says, is that which has similarity. So again, similarity means it is concordant with the mind that has it as an accompanier. Okay, so as you can see here, the definitions are very similar. In both cases of the main mind and the mental factor, it says it's something that has similarity with the other. And the way that it describes the mental factors, in the definition of the main mind, the mental factors are the one that arise as its accompaniers. Okay, whilst in the definition of the mental factors, it says they have similarity with the mind that has them as its retinue, as its accompaniers. Okay, so one has them in the retinue. So who has them in its retinue? It's the main mind that has a retinue and possesses all those mental factors. And those mental factors arise in the retinue of that main mind. Okay, and they have similarities. They are concordant with each other. So we have that thing in the definition where it says, we're talking about the definition of the mental factors. It says that has it as an accompanier. So who has them as a retinue? Who has them as a company that come around? It's the main mind that has them. So we have a situation where we have the main mind, and in the retinue of this main mind, we have the mental factors. And since they are in this situation, the mental factors are in the retinue of the main mind has a retinue of mental factors, they have similarities. They are concordant. In what way? They are concordant in 5 ways. So this is the next thing that we have to explain. All right, so the first one is the definition, the second is classification, and then we begin here with the classification of mind. It says, by means of the bases, we have 6. So we have eye awareness, ear awareness, nose awareness, tongue awareness, body awareness, and mental awareness. So when we say that they are classified as 6 from the point of view of the basis here is the uncommon empowering condition that gives rise to it. And we see that the different schools talk about this presentation of the group of 6 types of consciousness. So you can see in this first type of classification from the point of view of the basis here refers to the cause. So what gives rise to this? And that's why we say it refers to the uncommon empowering condition. So we say, for example, by depending upon its own uncommon empowering condition, the I sense power. So by depending on this, we generate I awareness, I consciousness, and so forth. Okay, so that was the first type of classification. Second type of classification is from the point of view of nature. So from the point of view of nature, we have three types. We have virtuous mind, non-virtuous mind, and neutral mind. So you have a mind that is generated, and in nature, it's a virtuous mind. Obviously, it will have to be concordant with a virtuous motivation in its retinue. But in any case, when we're looking just at the general classification in terms of the nature. The mind can either be virtuous, non-virtuous, or neutral. There's another way that we can classify the mind from the point of view of the realm. And in terms of the realm, we have three, because we have the mind of the desire realm, the mind of the form realm, the mind of the formless realm. Then in terms of grounds, we have 9, because we have in the form realm, we have 4 absorptions. In the formless realm, we have 4 absorptions, and then in addition to this, we add the mind of the desire realm, and that makes 9. Otherwise, we can classify the mind is into worldly and transworldly. So this, how we will interpret and explain these terms, worldly and transworldly, is going to vary according to the occasion. However, here you could say that contaminated mind is worldly, uncontaminated mind is transworldly. Or another way of explaining this is the mind prior to obtaining the path of seeing is worldly, and the mind from the point of obtaining the path of seeing becomes transworldly. So Geshe was saying an example, our mind, or Geshe was saying in particular my mind, I would say that this is a worldly mind, it is a contaminated mind. While the mind that exists in the continuum of an area, it is transworldly mind, and it is uncontaminated mind. Again, going back into this twofold classification of the mind as worldly and transworldly, you could say conceptual mind is worldly and non-conceptual mind is transworldly. So you can see this worldly, transworldly can be explained in many ways. Okay, so we have given here a group of 6 main minds. So most of the schools, so we start from the middle way consequence school, the middle way autonomy, ascertaining nature, the mind only school, they assert this, that the number of main minds is definitely 6. Okay, the reason why all the schools below the middle way consequence school consider from amongst this group of 6, they actually take the 6th one, which is mental consciousness, and they consider this to be the most important, the main one. They say it is the main one because it is very stable and it becomes the depository or the basis upon which imprints are placed. So it is interesting that we see that all these other schools below the middle way consequence school, they almost have this fascination with mental consciousness, and they really identify this as being very important, and they need to posit it as being something which is very stable and enduring. And this is for 2 reasons. The first reason, as we say, is because they say it's the platform, the foundation upon which you place all the mental imprints. The second reason is because they posited as the example of the person, because they say when you search to find a person, at the end of your investigation, you should be able to come up with something and say this is the person. Obviously, they're not going to say it is the aggregates, the form aggregates, right? But they come down to this mental consciousness and they say, this is the person. Whilst for the middleware consequent school, you search for the person, but at the end you don't find anything. However, for the other schools, you search for the person, and at the end you find this mental consciousness that is the basis exemplifying the person. So we can see that we have a number of the schools that say that the number of main minds is definite, and they say there are 6, and amongst them there are some who say it is the 6th one that is mental consciousness, that this is the one that is really important. However, there are those who have, especially schools of in the mind only and so forth, who say, no, there is actually additional. And the additional one is the one that they call the foundation of all. So what happens is that those who say there are 6 and they take the 6th one, the mental consciousness, definitely they talk a lot about the 6th the mental consciousness as being the foundation upon which all the mental imprints are placed. It is very stable and so forth. And also this becomes the foundation that exemplifies, is a good example for the person, right? When you're looking for the person, you're looking for an example, you take this as your foundation, as your example, your basis. But there are others who say, no, actually we need to separate a different type of consciousness, and we're going to call this the basis or the foundation of all. So it's as if they superimpose the same name, right? It is the foundation for all the consciousness, all the mental imprints, and it is the foundation exemplifying the person. But they carve it out of the 6 as a separate category, all right? And then together with that, they give another type of consciousness, which they call mentality. All right, so in this way, from 6, they become 7, and then they become 8. Okay, so let's see here, because we have more variations. Some of the mind-only school, so we're talking about sub-schools now, they say, not only do we have 8, we have one additional one that makes it 9, and this is called the like the one that the unclouded consciousness. All right, the one that has no it's not concealed, unclouded. Sorry, I can't come up with the right term. Okay, and then you have the great exposition who says there's only one mind, they're not 6 or 8 or 9. Okay, so actually if you study tenets, you will be able to identify that we have 4 different systems. We have some group of schools, some of the tenets, who say we have 6 types of main mind. Then we have others that say we have 8, and they come to the number of 8 by adding the foundation of all and afflicted mentality. So 6 become 8. Then you have a sub-school that comes in and says you have this unclouded consciousness that becomes 9. And then you have great exposition that says you only have 1. Okay, so 4 different systems.
sim true killing the true non sim so the carres quick killing sim so the carres.
All right, so from those who accept that we have 6 types of consciousness, which one is the main mind for them? Okay, so didn't we say that we have eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and the 6th one, mental consciousness. So take away the 5 that are sense consciousness, right? Take those away. the sixth one, mental consciousness, is the one that is the important one, isn't it? So this is how it was presented. And why is it that from the group of six, they consider the sixth one to be the most important? It is the most important for them because for them it is the most stable. And it is very important to identify a type of consciousness that is stable, because you need somewhere to place the karmic imprints, the potencies of karma. Why it is so important? Because as we need to have the law of cause and effect operating without any confusion, without any mistakes. So that needs two things. First of all, you need a foundation. You need a platform upon which you will place all the karmic imprints. You must place them somewhere. However, that's the first thing. The second thing is that this foundation upon which you place the karmic imprints must be something very stable. If you place them on sense consciousness, such as the eye consciousness, ear consciousness, and so forth, those things are not stable. So if you place the imprints, karmic imprints, on something that is not stable and deteriorates and disappears after a while, we're going to have there's going to be so much confusion about the results of karmic causes, isn't it? It will not be unerring, it will not be correct. So we need to have a very stable platform upon which we play the karmic imprints, and also we need to find something that will exemplify the person. When you look for the person, at the end you should be able to find something and say, this is what represents the person. This is what the person is. Okay, so this is why they choose the sixth one, mental consciousness. And they say this is the main one. Yeah. So why it is so important that we have a basis that is very stable upon which we place the imprints? Because you do some action, you create karmic imprints, they need to go somewhere. They need to be deposited somewhere. And if that basis upon which you place them is not stable, it means later on there is no guarantee you will be the one who will get the results of these karmic actions, isn't it? So to guarantee that the law of cause and effect operates without any mistake, this basis needs to be very stable. So Geshe says, you create virtuous imprints. You do something good, you create imprints or virtuous activity. So you don't want to lose any of this. In the future, you want to be the one who experiences the result. So those virtuous imprints, you want them to go on something that is very stable. So if you have something very stable that accepts the imprints of virtue, also, fortunately, unfortunately, the imprints of non-virtue will also be deposited there. It needs to be stable to guarantee that you will experience the results. Okay, so Geshe was saying it's like similar to the example of having some money. I'm not saying you should be hoarding money, but just for the sake of the example, if you have gold, if you have silver, you put it in a safe box. You don't put it in any container. You put it somewhere that it has a lock and you have a key. Actually, if you can have a second lock, triple lock, 5 locks of 5 keys, the more valuable it is, the more stable you want to have it. So you know how you go into the bank and you get a special box, the deposit there with many keys. Okay, so this type of thing. Okay, so those who accept that you have 6 types of consciousness, they say it's the 6th one, the mental consciousness, that has this characteristic of stability. Those who talk about the foundation of all, they describe it as having all these characteristics. We said there is also one category of the Great Exposition School, not all because they have sub-schools, right? Some of the sub-schools of the Great Exposition, they say there is only one mind. And the example that they give is like as if you have a house that has many windows, but inside the house, you only have one lamp. And the light from this lamp radiates or comes out of every window. So this says you only need one lamp. You don't need to have a different lamp on every window. So the windows are like, you know, the eyes and the ears and the nose and so forth. Okay. Obviously, the light that comes from every window is perceived in a different way. You know, so whatever comes through the eyes allows us to perceive form. Whatever comes through the ears allows us to perceive sounds and so forth. But they say inside, there's only one lamp, only one light. All right, so we came to the end of the class today. So that was the sort of like the general introduction for mind and mental factors. We stop here for today. Okay, let's do dedication now.